You are listening to the Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast,
where we talk about fine food and healthy living throughout Asia.
So let's get started. Hey everybody, Ian and Todd here.
Welcome to the Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast.
If this is your first time listening, then thanks for coming. The Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast is produced every week for your enjoyment, and show notes are found on our Facebook page.
Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram, or on my blog, toddinasia.com. That's Todd with 2 D's in Asia.com.
All links are in the show notes. Now, let's get started.
Okay, welcome to this week's version of Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia. I'm here with my co-host Ian Nenke. Ian, how are you today?
I'm great, thanks Todd, and it's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. We're here in my home today, and our guest of honor is Will Shua, who is one of the founding members of FOLO Farms, a local organic sustainable farm here in Johor, Malaysia. And welcome to our show, Will.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Hello, everyone.
Really had a chance to find out about you through Judy Millar, who's a local neighbor, and she said, "Hey, do you want to go see the farm that I get my produce from?" I said, "Yeah, is it organic?" She said, "Oh, yeah, it's organic. It's organic plus plus." So I was able to go up there last week and pay a visit, and I was just blown away. I mean, the place is so well run, but also so friendly and so professional, but also just such a family feeling there. It's just really my vision of, as Charles Eisenstein puts it, the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. And just very impressive what you've done there. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of FOLO Farms?
First, thank you very much for your kind words. We're still working very hard. The FOLO Farms started about 4 years ago. We were all professionals living in different parts of the world. And I was working in the Singapore government at that time, and had a little third life crisis. I went on a sabbatical about a year and traveled the world doing mindfulness, meditation.
Did you say third life crisis?
Yeah, I call it a third life crisis because I figured I'll live till like 150, right?
Oh, very good.
Yeah,
good. I've only had my second life crisis so far.
But crisis is great, right?
Yeah.
And so I went on a year's sabbatical, and out of that sabbatical, mainly doing meditation, came a realization that I needed to come home. So I'm from this city, and when I came back, I moved back to stay with my mother, and started contemplating what to do next, and got in touch with all my family and loved ones and friends that work did not allow me to. And met up with my childhood friends. So these are now the current founders of the farm. There's a doctor, Dr. Lemuel, who's a farming doctor. He's known as the farming doctor on Facebook. And then there's a couple of other childhood friends. They have their own businesses. We came together and spent a lot of time, and we were wondering what to do together. And one thing that we realized amongst our friends and family is this prevalence of chronic illnesses. So we realized that a lot of relatives were not well. They were all chronically ill, both physically and mentally. And some of them also very young. So we had a friend's sister who was like 27 years old with stage 4 kidney disease, and it's unheard of. All kinds of inflammatory disorders, autoimmune disorders, and mental health issues. And so that got us thinking. I had a lot of time. I was on my break, and just we started doing some research. And after a while, it all came down to really just 4 key factors we saw after doing research. We are all nerds. And the 4 things are now the pillars of our little community farm. The first thing that we found out was the food that we were eating. I think it's nowadays there's a lot more awareness around it. Mainly we're eating chemicals and pesticides and processed foods. And our food is calorie rich but nutrient poor, and microbially deficient, and that has a lot of impacts on not just physical but mental health. Right? They even recently found soil microbes linked to depression, all kinds of issues. So food was huge. It came up, and food is huge in Malaysia, right? So that was the main one. And then the second one that we found, again scientifically, was the environment, like, the disconnection with nature, and how humans and microbes have been in a marriage for 4.5 billion years, and for the last 60 years we decided to sanitize ourselves and move into the cities and use Dettol and all kinds of stuff. And now you can see the links between that and a lot of autoimmune disorders and health.
Right.
And so we found, wow, okay, so the environment is something that we are all disconnected from. And there's, if we read about things like deep ecology, there's a nature deficit in all of us. And sometimes when we wake up, we feel something empty. Is actually, they say it's the deep ecological misbalance that needs to be corrected. And so this whole idea of connecting back to the soil and nature and the food that we eat. So that was another thing that we found. The third factor we found was community. I mean, we started reading about communities in Greece and in Pakistan, and how open, intentional communities. In Malaysia we call it the kampong spirit. Where the village spirit. How that is really related to health, and it's also found that if you're sick and you're alone or disconnected, you die very fast. And if you're connected with a supportive community, whether it's a religious community or a social community of any sort, and they're supportive and you're open and honest and you're able to show that, be vulnerable, and you heal.
Actually, it's funny you say that, because they've a study I read many years ago was about that disconnection. If you don't have a connection with family, but even the study was actually about pets. People that own pets actually lived longer than people that didn't, because they had the elderly people, particularly in Western societies where the elderly often live by themselves. If they have a pet, it gives them that camaraderie.
Right.
They live longer, and they have something to have an affection, a love, and a bond for.
Yes. And
that kampong spirit, with family,
yes,
that's exactly right.
And you're very right, Ian. Like, community doesn't mean humans.
Yeah.
It also means animals and plants. And there's so much animal based therapies out there, farm based therapies that are available in all over the world these days.
Yeah.
And so that was huge for us as well. And then the last one, of course, is the spiritual element, which is I guess I like to call it doing something bigger than yourself and longer than your life. Always waking up and just making sure that every moment that you have, you try and do something that is bigger, for something bigger than yourself and longer than your life.
That's beautiful.
And that is sort of and when that happens, you get well. Immediately. You don't even have to wait 10 years for that to happen. But if you sort of just knowing that you're doing that gets you better. And so these 4 elements, basically, we read about it, we found out, and then just very naturally we thought, let's start a farm. And my late father had a small piece of land left behind, and it was very meaningful for me to work on the land that he left us with. And then we just thought, okay, we're gonna start a farm, but we need these 4 elements. So what can we do? And then we started, let's start a community farm. A community farm where people subscribe to a share of the harvest rather than buy it from supermarkets.
Right.
People bring their families to the farm and get in touch with nature, and then in the process get to know one another and build community. And in the process realize, and we have to do something. We have to also send the message that we're doing something bigger than ourselves and longer than our life. And that's where the food waste came into the picture. We're like, oh, there's all this waste around in the cities. Can't we use that and grow vegetables from there? And so that for every piece of vegetable that every family eats is not just bionutrient rich, microbes rich, but they also know that half the money that they pay for goes towards our own community truck that goes around collecting 3 tons of food waste from all the restaurants
all around Johor.
All around Johor, and bringing that to our farm and working with that. My teacher used to say, no mud, no lotus. Working with the mud and growing lotus flowers.
How many restaurants and the hotels are you picking up from now?
I think now we have about regularly we have about 5 or 6 partners. The main partner, our most supportive partner, is Renaissance Hotel. So they're part of the Marriott Group. The the owner, the executive chef, everyone's on board.
Awesome.
The whole, we have a WhatsApp group. They run it like very professionally. They make sure everyone separates their waste. That's the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
Getting everybody to separate their waste.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, and then we also do it with coffee shops.
The ground coffee,
fish sellers.
Ground coffee is amazing for
compost,
soil,
right?
composting.
Yeah, you being a farmer, and then fish waste,
Yes.
So we have a fish seller, a vegetable wholesaler. There's a lot of vegetable waste in Johor Bahru because they process vegetables before going to Singapore. So there's a lot of waste that gets thrown away here.
Yeah.
And then we work with another restaurant, packing restaurant, the biggest seafood restaurant in. So we collect everything, all kinds of waste. We don't discriminate the waste.
So the entire concept behind your organic farm is you collect food waste from restaurants. The food waste comes to your farm, you compost it, and then from the composting you grow vegetables. And rather than selling vegetables individually, members of the public can actually become a member, a subscribing member, and they pay how much is it a month or a year?
They subscribe 6 months in advance for a season. So because we are tropical, we don't have 4 seasons, so we split ourselves into 2 seasons.
Okay.
And so they pay for a share of the harvest for 1 season, which is 6 months. That's about, I think currently to sort of break even, it's about 2,000 ringgit. So it works out to be, and they get like 4 to 5 kilos of 8 to 10 kinds of vegetables every week. So that works out to be cheaper than cold storage and all that. And
it's fresh, and it's organic, and there's no chemicals or pesticides on it. You don't use any pesticides as well?
Yeah, we don't even use organic pesticides because what we believe is we eat the plants that are resilient. So on our farm, if like when Todd visited, we don't really protect the plants. We make sure that we grow the soil with our compost, both for the solid and liquid compost, and we know that the plants that are able to make it to maturity are the strong ones. Yes. And we eat those plants. We don't eat the pretty ones. We don't protect them. And also we make sure that the plants tell us how we are doing in terms of growing the soil. So my teacher always used to say, true farmers don't grow vegetables, they grow the soil. And the soil grows the vegetables. Yeah. So that's how we do it. It's all sort of, we can call it like wild way of farming.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be able to make it onto the subscriber list for the salad box.
Yes.
And I've had 2 deliveries so far. And man, this is like the best salad I've ever had. I have this big salad bowl. I'm making like a huge salad bowl like every night. It's just like eating it up. Yeah. And I can tell already just from these 2 weeks the difference it's making in my digestion and my gut health. It's incredible. Did you have to, before you even grew vegetables, condition the soil, and how did that process go?
Yep. So to condition the soil, most of the soil in Johor Bahru it's been disturbed, and I think most of the urban, semi-urban, rural areas in the world, the soil has been heavily disturbed. The double whammy in tropical places is when you disturb the soil or you deforest the soil, the tropical rain comes and everything gets washed away.
All the topsoil?
Yeah, all the topsoil gets washed away.
You mean by development?
By development, by deforestation, by logging and all that kind of stuff. Or palm oil.
Topsoil is the most important part of your soil. Basically, the topsoil, it varies in different parts of the world. In Australia, we have very delicate soils, so the topsoil is only about the first 5 centimetres. For Malaysia, how deep is the topsoil for Malaysia?
Well, in the tropical forest, where there is very heavy leaf coverage, the topsoil can go very deep. So like, in tropical forest, you can go about 1 foot to 2 feet. In peatlands, which is, in mangrove forest, it can go even to meters, of humus. However, that gets eroded away in like 5 seconds when it's all totally exposed.
And the soil underneath that is pretty much dormant and useless because there's no microbiology in the soils.
It's hard rock. It's almost like hard rock.
So did you first go around and start collecting compost? Was that the first thing you did?
Yeah.
I mean, the food waste for the compost?
Yeah. So we first started by we first started more traditional when we were starting on our first piece of land. It was more traditional, so we actually used a manure and a little bit of manure and a little bit of other people's compost to start amending the land.
What sort of manure as well? A combination?
Aged chicken manure, cow manure and stuff. But that was on our first piece of land. So when we realized that that was not sustainable because of the way we grew our animals, and also that we wanted to grow for more when we were growing for 6 families, and when there are 30 more families wanting our vegetables, we decided to move to the current farm, and that was when also we found out the beauty of food waste, because food waste is a globalized food chain, so inherent in the food waste is an international set of microbes and an international diversity of nutrients, macronutrients. So we realized that was if you want to do sort of peri-urban or urban farming, that is the best source of nutrients and microbes for your vegetables. That's probably the best way to return the ecology back.
It's the most natural as well, because you're not using synthetic fertilizers, which has a heavy reliance on oils, petroleum oils and such like that. Yeah. But it's the natural ecosystem working into itself. So if people can imagine a fruit tree, for example, it naturally drops its fruit and it rots away and decays. After it rots and decays, all those nutrients they go back into the soil. So what you're doing is basically keeping that natural organic process going.
Yes. You can think of the city as a tree, and the city is dropping its food waste, and we are taking that and we are putting it back to the roots of the city, which is all these urban farms.
That's a nice image. Yeah. Is there any concern with, well, first let me ask, in the restaurant or the hotel, all food just goes in the bucket? Do they have to, is there any kind of foods that can't go in the bucket?
Well, we take everything.
You take everything.
We work on the principle of diversity and resilience. So we want New York City. We want New York City. It's, when the bankers are in trouble, the actors take over. Actors in trouble, the performers take over. The restaurants take over. So our first principle is diversity, and so we take everything, and we actually are very aware of who we collect from. So we don't try and collect from the same. We don't take all coffee shop waste. We take from restaurants, international buffets, vegetables, and we want something from the sea, something from the land, because there's aquatic microbes and terrestrial microbes and stuff. So we don't discriminate. Of course, when we notice that certain waste is, like, for example, if they start putting a lot of soup and oil and all that, we actually tell them that there's much better ways to recycle those things, like cooking oil, and you can actually recycle it. People actually collect used cooking oil to do other stuff like soaps and other products out of it. So when we notice a lot of imbalance in the food waste, we'll let the partners know, you can do better things with this. You don't have to dump it in with us. Or if sometimes we see fresh bread, we're like, you can feed chickens with this. You don't have to give it to us. So that's how we try and do things.
Is there any concern that the food that's going in the buckets is grown inorganically?
So that's the number one question on our farm tours. And the beautiful thing about aerobic composting, and the beautiful thing about allowing the diversity of the microbes to thrive is that is that everything breaks down. So, and if you allow the natural time for the composting to happen, if you allow the mesophilic, thermophilic, the whole cycle to happen naturally without any electricity or any added man-made interventions, and if you allow a diverse set of microbes to work on it, everything breaks down. And of course, if you Google, you research, you can see that aerobic composting, they have done tests, and known pesticides and known chemicals are all broken down into biologically available format.
And that's from the microbes working on
breaking down. So there's a microbe for anything in this world. Even nuclear waste, if they find it in onsens at 100-degree water temperatures in the deepest anaerobic ocean environments. There's a microbe for
deep sea vents you're talking about.
So it's all so the key is really going back to diversity. And if we read up on some of the more famous or the best microbiologists around in the world, like one of them is called Rob Knight, and he will tell you that even I am the best microbiologist in the world, we are only at the tip of the iceberg in terms of understanding what microbes are or can do. We are like a slither, because there's so many combinations and diversity and all that. So for him, he says, if I were to advise you how to bring your children up, let them grow up on a farm, let them be exposed to the unknown, to dirt, to soil, because there's just so much that we don't know. And why do we just act on what we know and don't respect what we don't know? A lot of farmers struggle because they try and control everything, whereas we should actually let that 99% of the unknown just sort of do its thing. And when that happens, the soil gets well and things get broken down.
They found in Australia with a study many years ago, but they found that children in farming communities actually had a much better immune system than those in the cities, partly because they got to go out and explore and dig their hands into the soils and get into those microbes. And it is actually healthy to get some germs in life, whereas the children in the cities, they wouldn't be exposed to any of these microbes or anything in the soils, and even in their houses, they're constantly sterilising everything, so it kills off everything. Going back to microbes, the importance of that in organic farming is extremely important. One of the problems that we've had in Australian farming is with the introduction of herbicides and pesticides during the 50s and 60s, there was this, I suppose, multinational education of Australian farmers, and they said that basically use these chemicals, use these fertilisers, and you'll have amazing crops, and this is the only way to go. And sadly, a lot of people have bought into that trap. So they're spending a huge amount of money on pesticides and fertilisers, and I'm not talking about $10,000, $20,000. You can be looking at hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars just on one farm in Australia. And the damage that these do, a lot of people don't know, but the chemicals actually kill a lot of your microbiology or microorganisms in the soil, which are really important for healthy plant life. Yes. Is that right, Will?
Yes, I agree completely. That's also based on a reductionist approach to agriculture. Just because urea makes leaves green and plants grow fast, and then that's the only thing that you can use. But when you do that, you compromise things that you don't know, and you don't respect things that you don't know. And soil life is all based on the soil food web, which goes from the tiniest microbes to the insects to the entire sort of pyramid that supports us as humans. And when you overuse anything in life, whether it's nitrogen fertilizers or chemical fertilizers, you disrupt that balance, and then over time that soil becomes worse and worse, and plants become sick, and you then have to use pesticides and all that, and then it becomes this vicious cycle. And then pests that survive in that environment get stronger, and you then have to use other kinds of pesticides.
Right, never ending.
Yeah, and then companies will start introducing seeds that are sort of immune to their pesticides, and then you
resistance.
The whole thing going. Yeah.
We have the same problem in Australia where they've been using Roundup Ready, which is a common,
Monsanto.
Monsanto. We shouldn't be saying names like that, but anyway.
Brought to you by Monsanto.
But it's been used so heavily that a lot of the weeds are now becoming resistant. So as each year goes by, the farmers have to use more and more chemical, which is actually advantageous for the chemical companies because they make more money, but not so great for the farmer. So it's a massive issue. But the other thing is, Will, can you correct me if I'm wrong? A lot of the chemicals, even after they've been used in the environment, after the farmer stops using them, a lot of those chemicals, they still stay in the soils for some time, don't they?
Yes, they do. I've done a lot of reading on this. I think in Europe, there's a lot of research done on this. They find glyphosate and stuff like that in the urines of children. Even months and months after that, some traces of chemicals remain in the soil for years. These are the known ones, and there are also the unknown ones, banned ones, and stuff like that. DDT, that they can't sell in developed countries, that they push to developing countries, and they have no names. I've talked to farmers in Malaysia, and they use these things with no names.
They don't even know what it is.
I saw that on your TEDx talk.
Yep.
Farmers using a black syrupy substance. It looked pretty gross.
It looked like just black oil. Black crude.
And they just use one cap of it with a huge tub of water, and everything dies.
How much water?
Just like a big tank.
200 litre water?
No, gallons.
200 gallons. So with just one capful.
That kills everything.
It kills everything.
That's disturbing.
I'm a volunteer for Pachamama Alliance, which one of their chief goals is to create a more environmentally sustainable world. But I also subscribe to a number of what I call the enemy newsletters and websites. And I recently saw one by it's a newsletter called What's Up With That, WATTS as in energy, What's Up With That. And there's a scientific study that's coming out now and saying organic farming is actually worse for the planet than conventional farming. And the two main reasons, I won't read the whole study, but the two main reasons is one, that you can never get the output that you can with conventional fertilizers and things like that.
Yeah.
And the other is that organic farming, for the most part, is only affordable by a very small percentage of people. And I'm wondering if you can address those two questions.
Sure. So the first one is about output and yield, which is probably the biggest sort of Achilles heel for organic farmers. The scientific and rational way to address this question is to ask people to look up the Rodale Institute.
Okay. And Rodale, how do you spell that?
Rodale, Rodale.
Okay.
It's one of the oldest organic institute in the US, and they have this, I think it's called a 25-year study that they have done. They have got, like, they basically did conventional farming alongside organic farming and projected it over. For the last 25 years, they've been monitoring the yields and the effects and all that for the 25 years, and they've published studies on it. And you can see that in the long run, organic farming is not incomparable, sometimes even better than organic farming, than traditional farming in yield. It goes back to the whole long-term, short-term thing. Yeah. And also you do less work, the soil gets more fertile, as the ecology remains and all that. That's probably the rational way of addressing the question of yield. The more sort of emotional question for me, the way to answer it is that we waste our food, and the way the current food production system has been sort of played out with the sort of the capitalist way of doing things.
We're a throwaway society.
We throw away more than I think some numbers says anywhere between half and 2/3 of our food get lost along the way. And goes through about 25 different hands, travels 10,000 kilometers to places, and when people talk about yield, they have to talk about waste at the same time, and also the decentralization of growing food as opposed to the centralization of growing food.
Exactly. Actually, while you're on that point, that topic, a lot of food, so much food is sold internationally and goes so far, but Todd actually spoke to me about this some time ago. A lot of people forget about the footprint that it leaves in terms of greenhouse gases, fuel use to get those products to market. Rather than concentrating on buying and eating local food, we're distributing stuff all over the world, and it's just crazy.
And they're taking in the study, I think my argument against it is they're taking the study and they're sort of putting a tight bubble around the parameters, and they're not putting into account some of those costs of the fuel, the travel, the waste, and everything else. They're just saying plot of field versus plot of field. And the other thing about that too is you're comparing against huge agribusiness where they're just growing one crop. And if you're comparing that against an acre of organic corn, you may never have the output that you would have with just one monocrop. Thousands of acres of wheat or thousands of acres of corn or what have you. But that's not what we're trying. That's not what a lot of that stuff ends up being. Not even food.
Right.
It ends up being highly processed, non-nutrient rich. Forget non-nutrient rich. Just no nutrients whatsoever.
Yes.
Right.
And also,
and a lot of the times it's tasteless as well. Sorry to interject. You get tomatoes in Australia, buy it from the shop, the big like a cold store, not cold storage, but we have other supermarkets over there. And if you actually grow your own tomatoes, which we used to do as a family, it's so much juicier and tastier, and you can really appreciate the vegetables for what they are. But when you buy them from the supermarkets, sometimes they're kept in storage for months on end at 1 degree Celsius or whatever, just to keep them going through the off season when they're not, because they are seasonal fruits, and a lot of people don't realise it. But society wants fruit all year round.
Nice firm tomato. 365 days a year,
yeah, and they want to make sure there's no spots or blemishes and all that sort of rubbish. But natural vegetables, they'll have spots and blemishes, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and the whole and listening to your body actually knows what food is good for you and what is not if you listen to it deeply enough.
Right.
So that I completely agree with you. One of the biggest markers for nutrition richness in food is actually the taste, and there's a reason for that. It was designed for you to know, but not sugar, but like real good taste, in fresh fine food. And that's, and then the other way of looking at yield is when you try and sort of defend organic agriculture on in terms of yield, is like trying to defend, with the rules of football, which is that winning is everything.
Yeah.
Right? So yield is the same as economic growth.
Yeah.
So if you want to maximize everything for economic growth, then you're trying to do something right, but based on the rules of what the existing paradigm is, which is yield is good.
Yeah.
Right? But we touched upon this. Yield is not everything. When it comes to food, it's not about yield. It's not about quantity.
Most of the problem is food waste.
Yes, it's not about food security. It's about food sovereignty, right?
Yeah.
It's not about filling your stomach. It's about health. It's about wellness.
Yeah.
And so for me, there's a better way to talk about organic agriculture versus traditional agriculture rather than just saying yield.
Right.
Yes.
Are you familiar with Paul Hawken's book Drawdown?
I've heard about the book, but I haven't read it yet.
He compiled and edited this book called Drawdown, and it's basically a list with explanations of 100 of the top things that we can do to not just slow down or stop climate change, but to reverse it.
Yes.
And one of the, I think number 6 or number 4, top 10 is eliminate food waste or significantly reduce food waste.
Yes. And that's the key to the second question you mentioned. Why is it so expensive?
Yeah.
And the cost of it is only the top 1% of society gets to eat food like that and all that. And again it's a very funny question because you buy a $2,000 iPhone and you don't want to spend $2,000 on health. And so again it's a very funny question to me because we a lot of the part of this world. I mean, there are of course parts of this world that's still lacking basic infrastructure and all that. But ironically, that's where they grow the best food locally, right? Yeah. But also food waste for me, at least for FOLO, is the key because that's where the organic matter is. That's where the nutrients and the microbes are, and we are now paying for it to be thrown away because we have a tendency to throw away things that we don't like and that smells bad.
Right.
But if we know how to embrace that, there's something like 2.5 billion tons of it every year that can be converted into organic hummus, not just normal hummus, but rich hummus that can then be put back into the soil and grow food. And when you have that kind of movement, then all of a sudden prices go down. And
just as nature designed it.
Yeah, just as nature designed it. And look at what Germany did after World War II. I mean, Germany is one of the countries that recover their food waste the most. And you look at their forest, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And you can see that. And I feel that you have to start somewhere. Not sort of debate on the price of the food, but more where do you want to put your money in health, in long-term health, wellness, in the environment, but also to recognize the opportunity that the waste gives us, the food waste gives us.
How do you find the general public in Southeast Asia? How is it? Is it easy to educate them, or has it been difficult to educate them? Not just the public, but also farmers, because a lot of people have always been in that mindset where they go to the store, they buy the food, but they're not always told about organics and how important it is.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of awareness out there?
It's definitely grown. If not, I think the farm will not exist now. Maybe 10 years ago, it would be hard to start FOLO farms. So definitely the awareness has grown. Different generations. We are an intergenerational farm. Thought you would have seen my mom and the kids running around.
Yeah.
So different generations respond to different things. So like for our parents, it's all about health. So if you can link that to health, it's very important for them. For the younger generation, like my nephews and younger people that come around, it's all about the environment. So that's the environmental message resonates properly with them. So for me, is the awareness has grown. The action is still a little lacking, but the awareness has grown.
Yeah. Is there an organic certification?
There is a Malaysian organic certification. As a matter of fact, this year we have been approached by the Department of Agriculture, and who is sort of wanting to help us get on that track to be nationally certified organic. So there is the intention. Even on the food waste front, there are many intergovernmental initiatives to try and reduce food waste. That regulations are coming on board to separate waste and then to separate food waste for the residents and commercial. I think on the policy and regulation side, it's sort of moving. It's moving. The implementation is another story.
Yeah. Well, you have a huge farm up north, which I'll just say, and we can edit it later if you want to, but it's Cameron Highlands.
Yes.
And they grow, I would say, most of the food for Malaysia and also Singapore. And, you mentioned how much food that is coming into Singapore in your TED Talk. And that is it's almost like a trap. It's like so much that's already gone into farming that way that it seems like it would just take so much to sort of undo, first of all, just undo the damage. Mm-hmm. And then I don't know how long you have to wait until the soil kind of heals itself, or even with additional help from food waste or organic composting, speed it up a little bit. But it just seems like this trap of this is just the way we do things, and it's too big to change, and what can we all do? And I know from my work with environmental issues and spiritual issues, that mindset of that's just the way that it is probably the most difficult thing to work with.
Yeah.
And this kind of bridges over to some of the spirituality you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's a good bridge to be able to talk about, changing of people's minds and their awareness and things like that. And what have you found personally? You mentioned that in your third life crisis, you came to a spiritual awakening of sorts. Maybe talk about that a little bit, and then see how talking about your vision of not just working for today, but also, for the next generation and the generation after that.
My biggest inspirations in terms of farmers from Malaysia are all actually in the Cameron Highlands. Why? Because they're at the front. Mm-hmm. So there are farms like Terra Farm, Hatiku Farms, Cameron Organics. There are some really farmers that are in Cameron Highlands, amongst the people who are using chemicals and pesticides. They're really trying to do the right thing.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah, so there are farmers out there and that we really respect, that are our very dear friends, and that are really trying to do good things. There are definitely systemic challenges there because everything is clustered. And actually, if you talk to the farmers that are not doing it organically, they are all not evil people. They're not the enemy.
They're just trying to make
they make ends meet. Their lease is 1 year old. They have no choice. Their land is already so depleted that they just have to keep going. Yeah. So for me, as long as there is that human element, there's always that hope. So a lot of respect goes to the people who are in Cameron Highlands that are doing the right thing. Yeah. What we think our place, especially as FOLO, because we have 6 guys who used to be professionals. We're not farmers in Cameron Highlands. Our place is in the cities. So that for us, we want to play our part in the cities. Right. And in the city, it's about education, awareness, about talking to people like you guys, about food waste, about urban farming, about growing your own food and respecting that, and then becoming the bridge between the rural farmers and the consumers, right? That's the role that we want to play, and if we all do our part, like different organs of a body, and then we can probably do cause some change. Yeah. In terms of my own personal take on this spiritually, I used to work in the public sector, and before that the private sector, and then in the social enterprise sector, trying to find a way that I can impact the world, right? I mean, I was very fortunately brought up well educated and all that, and there's a bunch of us in this world that has been brought up well, that wants to say, I want to save this world and I want to help this world, and it's a huge aspiration, right? And there's a lot of talk about social impact, environmental impact, carbon credits, number of lives saved, number of people lifted from the poor, all these indicators of impact, and I used to live in that world, but this sort of that spiritual journey that I went on flipped that completely around. Wow. And for me now, it's really, my life has to be the message. It's about being, not doing. It's about interbeing, not doing. And it's about that ripple, It's not about going out there and trying to tell people what to do, and it's about being and not doing. And I feel that has, in the last 3 years, it has worked so much better than me joining the United Nations, Forgive me, United Nations, but or
you're doing your little part and being a part of the solution, not the problem.
It's about that butterfly flapping its wings and causing a typhoon in the other, and it's about that impact that you do just by being
butterfly.
What was your government job in Singapore?
Oh, I was working for the Economic Development Board. So
Wow.
So that it's the agency that plans the economy of Singapore for the next 50 years.
Wow.
So it's and yeah. So I was
Wow,
there.
we're gonna have to do part 2 on, on that alone.
Yeah.
So ironically, it looks to me from my perspective of you, is that as you've made that shift from what can I do, what impact can I make, to more like how can I be, and kind of living in your own flow, you're actually making a bigger impact than when you were doing a bunch of trying and doing.
Yes.
That's sort of beautiful.
It's well, the first impact is internal, right? And physically as manifested, I before my sabbatical I was 95 kilos. I had all red, my medical results were red, and I was mentally, stressed and anxious and all that stuff. And physically the impact has been amazing, in terms of health, and then mentally as well. Then is that, for lack of better word, presence, right? And to sort of, when people see you, and they're like, wow, what happened? Like my colleagues and my ex-colleagues and all that. And from there, you engage in the conversation, and it's deeper, and you never know, right? And you might meet the next Barack Obama, and he might, be someone just walking around and like, whoa, this guy's happy. Why? And then he goes on and he does this crazy thing.
Exactly.
So that is, for me, is to take that aspiration that we all have to want to do something for this world, and to channel it into the next person that you meet, and to the next step that you take, and that next thing that you do is to take that big aspiration and to just put all of that into that next thing, and to invest fully in that.
I want to talk a little bit about growing from where you're at, and not in terms of economic growth necessarily, but in terms of sort of spreading the good news. And also when we talk about the availability of organic produce, until I found you, I mean, it was going to Jaya Grocery or Aeon Bukit Indah, or there are some organic wet markets out here, or where there is organic available, but it's like slim pickings. And I'm interested in, as expat American who came here and used to have the luxury, which I knew it was a luxury kind of mentally when I was in the States, but going to Whole Foods, grocery store, now just seems like such a luxury of just pure abundance of awesomeness, like every aisle, everything. And I want to have that be true for Malaysia and all of Southeast Asia and the whole world. So, Will, how are we going to do that?
Sorry, you stepped into a big question there. It's like you're at the beauty pageant.
And here's your question.
How do you?
Let me go. Let me start first things first. I know you had a conversation with Sunway.
Yes.
And they have a lot of land, and from where I stand, and I drive by their property all the time, there's just so much available land there. Is there anything going on with Sunway?
Well, we're still in discussions, so probably can't really tell much right now.
And what is their interest? What do they want to do?
So there has been, in the last 1 year, I have to say, quite a few landowners and developers that have came to us with the interest of setting up food waste composting and community farms on their land, whether it's on their land or on government land in their neighborhood, or on their own private reserve land, or even in green belts on their land. And well, of course, there is a commercial element to it, because it makes their neighborhood looks more attractive to people who are ecologically sensitive, but also I think a lot of them feel that this is the right thing to do, because the landfills are filling up and all that. And we have received quite a few requests, and from not just Sunway, but quite a few landowners. We're even talking to resort island owners, and and stuff like that. Back to the question on growth, it's a big question. Normally, when I'm faced with a big question, I rely on the wise ones, and for me, the wise ones are my teachers. And one of my teachers is P.A. Loisel. He's the guy who taught us how to compost in Taiwan. He was an ex-NASA scientist, and he was a Silicon Valley pioneer, and he basically used food waste in the city. He composted it. He grew vegetables, and he sort of saved his wife from breast cancer.
Wow.
Maybe another podcast there. And so I remember when we first met him, and I said, Pierre, I'm so inspired by what you do. Our families went to see him in Taiwan, and he had just recovered from a stroke, eating his vegetables, and he was looking at us, just recovering from a stroke, and I said, what are 3 things I have to do? I was still a very strategic government servant. So for me, it was keep it simple. What are the 3 things I have to do what you do, to make it happen? And he looked at me in the face and he said, Will, compost.
Awesome.
And I feel that really still is the message. If everyone can do their part in their communities and start not looking at the lotus flower, but looking at the mud, and facing it and embracing it, not looking at your happiness but your suffering, and to look at that waste and not see waste, but start seeing gold, seeing microbes, seeing nutrients, seeing the trees, leaves falling down on the earth, like what Ian mentioned. If you can see that, and then you do something about it in your neighborhoods and do it together as a community, not do it individually, do it together as small communities, and you start composting, naturally whatever you put into the soil around that area will be great food and health and everything, and nature and community, right? And so really for me, if there is such a thing as an agricultural revolution, it doesn't start in the rural areas. It starts in the urban areas. It starts with our food waste.
Because it's all about it's buying power of the ordinary consumer, isn't it? If you start, as listeners, demanding organic produce, then farmers will start producing it more and more.
Yes.
So, and that's exactly right.
And the farmers that are closest to you, which are the urban and the semi-urban, peri-urban, or in the US they call it peri-urban. These farmers will respond first. And the biggest weapon they have in their hands is their food waste, because all the food waste get lost in the suburbs before it comes or gets thrown back into the suburbs, right? And so from there, you see your farmer, you know your farmer, you trust your farmer, and then these farmers will start having good livelihoods out of it, and then from there it becomes the bridge to the rural farmers, and then it's a peri-urban movement. It's not a rural. You can't just sit back and hope that all the rural farmers change their lives. So really it comes back to compost. Compost.
If I want to do something here, let's just say in East Ladang for starters. Number 1, just compost. Find some land.
Collect all the food waste from
get everyone to save their food waste. Okay.
Make compost.
And then I can get some help from you or someone from FOLO, like how to actually do the composting, because sorry for my language, but I don't know shit about composting.
Pun intended.
Pun intended.
So yes, so we are happy to help you. Our farm is open every week, and also members can come anytime.
Okay.
And we're happy to figure out for that scale what to do, and then just start growing food. And of course, for landowners that have a bigger land, like you mentioned Sunway or Sutra or who, then you can think about it in the neighborhood scale. And I think that's helpful, because then that begins to support livelihoods. There are young people out there, like in the US, young people who are naturally farmers, and they don't want to be consultants and bankers and accountants, right? And there are people like that in Malaysia and Singapore, and they have nowhere to go. So once you are at a level of like a neighborhood level, then you have resident farmers, and they are artisan farmers. I always like to say it's the same revolution as coffee. 30 years ago, the coffee in Malaysia was made by an old man in a coffee shop for 20 cents. And today we have artisan baristas. It's not a bad thing, because it's that dignity of that profession, And if you can raise that dignity of that profession of farmer back to where it originally was, which was very well respected, and to have artisan farmers supporting their own livelihoods, and then I think that will happen. And then from there, they become the bridge to the rural farmers, and I think that will be a very virtuous cycle.
Well, Ian is a multi-generational farming family, comes from a multi-generational farming family, and I want to be a farmer. Like, that's what I actually want to do now, is be a farmer. So let's get it going here.
For sure.
So if I want to come to the farm and just learn and help and be part of the community, I just show up, or I have to make an appointment, or how does that work?
So our farm is open every Saturday,
Saturday.
between 11 to 3. That's where families come and collect the
Ah.
vegetables. So that's the best time if you
Okay.
don't want to make an appointment. I think we have twice a month we have a formal sort of tour / workshop. I think one is happening tomorrow, which is Saturday.
Oh, what time tomorrow?
I think it starts at about 9.
Is there a cost involved or?
Yes, the tours are pre-booked online.
Ah.
The open days you can just come
Okay.
and then speak to whoever's available. But we can start the conversation there.
Yeah.
Go and smell the food waste, touch it, and then figure it out whether this is for
Right.
you.
Get some good dose of microbes.
Yes.
Roll in it.
Yeah.
yes. And then then from there we can
Okay.
figure
So
out.
any Saturday, 11 o'clock.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's open to the public.
Open to public.
What can you give an address if
You just need to go to Google Maps and Google FOLO.
FOLO, FOLO.
Banfu, BAN. FOO. That's the.
okay.
That's the.
And I'll put a link to that in our show notes too.
Wonderful.
And FOLO stands for
Feed our loved ones.
Feed Our Loved Ones.
Yeah.
Feed our loved ones.
And just to, I just wanted to touch a little bit more because you have, the 4 pillars on which your company and yourself are founded. And if you could just tell us a little bit about your spiritual practices and sort of spiritual stuff right now.
Right. I'm a big fan and also a learner and practitioner of Zen meditation. I follow this tradition called Plum Village, and it's founded by a Zen master called Thich Nhat Hanh. I was very lucky to find his teachings, and now I practice in his tradition. It's a very inclusive tradition that inclusive of all faiths, and yes, that involves, and it's all about a few things, but it's mainly about practice, not about theory. And so it's about having a daily practice and in every part of your life, including talking and eating and listening and community. And it's also big on community. It's about that how we interact with everyone else, and a spiritual practice is not a solo practice to achieve anything or enlightenment or anything. It's about crossing the shore together. So it's a practice I'm very in love with, and I practice with a group in Singapore. That's where I am now. Where I was completely critical and scientific and anti institutional religion and everything.
Right.
And what I've found is that it has given me a deep respect for all faiths, and so it's something that I feel is very important to do what we do, because a lot of us have very good intentions, but we find ourselves in situations where we don't have the time and the space to act on what our intentions are, and having, I guess, a mindfulness practice of any sorts, whether it's yoga or prayer or meditation or Zen or anything, and that actually allows us to pause and allows us to find the time and space and to let go of what we don't need to do and find that time and space. And only with that simplification of your life, with that time and space, can you act on what you do. It's a very practical thing. I wanted to do good for very long, but you can't do it with a full schedule every week. And so for me, it really is that simple. It's letting go and simplifying your life, not wanting that condo or that extra house or that whatever you want to achieve, and simplifying it, and then with that time and space, act on what you really want to do. And so that was sort of where I am now.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Ian?
Just one last thing. This is going back to pesticides, but as you know, being a farmer, pesticides are a huge thing in Australian farming. My father actually had prostate cancer years ago, and it was at that time my mother started doing some research into it, and it was quite disturbing to know that there appeared to be quite a significant rise in prostate cancers, a lot of different cancers in our community. Particularly with my father's generation. My father's generation used chemicals like DDT, which are now banned. But there was an interesting website that I found this morning, and it said in America and the US, the Agricultural Health Study, which began in 1993 and is still in progress, found that farmers had an increased incidence of many cancers, cancers that are not predominantly tied to diet and tobacco use, as are colon and lung cancers. Farmers had a much higher risk of developing non-Hodgkin lymphoma, leukemia, multiple melanoma, and soft tissue sarcoma. They also had higher rates of brain cancer, stomach cancer, prostate cancer, and skin cancer. These cancers were all associated with work-related exposure to toxins. In addition to cancer, use of rotenone and paraquat also led to an increased risk of Parkinson's disease. Organic chlorine chemicals have also been found to increase the risk of diabetes and thyroid disease. So just to give you an idea, listeners, the amount of problems that we have through the use of pesticides, herbicides, and all these unnatural products. Fertilizers, it's just crazy. So when you go out to shop next, try to look for your organic lettuces, cucumbers, carrots, and go see Will and his farm. Check it out and embrace organic farming, because even though those farmers are getting the tip of the sword with most of the exposure, we as consumers are also getting exposed to those products as well.
Yes.
Right. And in terms of cost, maybe think about it this way. $1 more for an organic zucchini as opposed to a pesticide-filled zucchini is a lot cheaper than colon cancer.
Exactly.
Yes. And you're supporting. I guess you're supporting a growing group of young people who want to live this life, who will then become, inspire other people who want to farm this way, and therefore bring the cost down in future, which is organic farming. Yeah.
Well, Will, just what a thrill to meet you and have you come over and talk with us. I'm just so filled with just love for you that I'm just really totally into what you're doing and what kind of impact you're making. And it's so great to see someone who loves what they're doing. Passionate and is just really just doing so much good in this world. So I really appreciate you and your time today. And is there anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, I want to really thank you both. Sharing is very important. I think farmers are probably the least skillful at expressing themselves fully, and I think having that support and sharing what we do in a better way, in a more skillful way, is very important. So really just very grateful for you guys, and everybody plays a role in this. And so yes, I'm looking forward, and thank you for eating our vegetables, and and looking forward to building more community together on this journey.
All right. Well, Ian, thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
And Will Shua, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Todd and Ian.
All right. Okay.
Cheers. If you're enjoying the Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast, please consider supporting us by going to our homepage at www.finefoodandhealthylivingasia.com and making a donation.
We are beginning a new way to support the show by subscribing as a loyal member. Another option on our homepage at finefoodandhealthylivingasia.com. There are options to choose for the level of support you wish to give.
We will always make our podcasts available for free and appreciate your patronage to be able to do so.
If you subscribe with iTunes, please remember to give us a 5-star rating. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so and then give us a 5-star rating. For other subscribers on Google Play, Spotify, or any other aggregators, please rate us there. Once again, thank you for listening to the show.